Hi, it's me, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm here on my nice comfy couch and I'm ready for story time. Find a comfortable place in your house where you can curl up and let's get ready for a really good book. When last we were reading Beezus and Ramona had to take the library book back to the library and it was all scribbled up. But Miss Evans came up with a way that solved the problem. So now let's pick up where we left off. Chapter 2, Beezus and Her Imagination. Beezus and Ramona both looked forward to Friday afternoons after school. Beezus because she attended the art class in the recreation center in Glenwood Park. Ramona because she was allowed to go to the park with Beezus and play in the sand pile until the class was over. This Friday, while Beezus held Ramona by the hand and waited for the traffic light to change from red to green, she thought how wonderful it would be to have an imagination like Ramona. Oh, you know Ramona. Her imagination runs away with her, Mother said when Ramona made up a story about seeing a fire engine crash into a garbage truck. That child has an imagination a mile long, the Quimby's grown-up friends remarked when Ramona sat in the middle of the living room floor in a plastic wading pool she had dragged up from the basement and pretended she was in a boat in the middle of the lake. Did you ever see so much imagination in such a little girl? The neighbors asked one another when Ramona hopped around the yard pretending she was the Easter Bunny. One spring day, Ramona had got lost because she started out to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The rainbow had appeared to end in the park until she reached the park, but then it looked as if it ended behind the supermarket. When the police brought Ramona home, Father said, "Sometimes I think Ramona has too much imagination." Nobody, reflected Beezus, ever says anything about my imagination. Nobody at all. And she wished more than anything that she had imagination. How pleased Miss Robbins, the art teacher, would be with her if she had an imagination like Ramona's. Unfortunately, Beezus was not very good at painting. At least not the way Miss Robbins wanted boys and girls to paint. She wanted them to use their imagination and to feel free. Beezus still squirmed with embarrassment when she thought of her first painting, a picture of a dog with "bow wow" coming out of his mouth in a balloon. Miss Robbins pointed out that only in the funny papers did dogs have "bow wow" coming out of their mouths in balloons. Bow wow in a balloon was not art. When Miss Robbins did think one of Beezus's paintings was good enough to put it up on the wall, she always tacked it way down at the end, never in the center. Beezus wished she could have a painting in the center of the wall. "Hurry up, Ramona," Beezus coaxed. Then she noticed that her sister was dragging a string along behind her. "Oh, Ramona," she protested, "why did you have to bring Ralph with you?" Ralph was an imaginary green lizard. Ramona liked to pretend she was leading by a string. "I love Ralph," said Ramona firmly, "and Ralph likes to go to the park." Beezus knew it was easier to pretend along with Ramona than to make her stop. Anyway, it was better to have her pretend to lead a lizard than to pretend to be a lizard herself. "Can't you carry him?" she suggested. "No," said Ramona. "He's slimy." When the girls came to the shopping district, Ramona had to stop at the drugstore scales and pretend to weigh herself while Beezus held Ralph's string. I weigh 11 pounds, she announced, while Beezus smiled at Ramona's idea of her weight. It just goes to show how much imagination Ramona has, she thought. At the radio and phonograph store, Ramona insisted on petting his master's voice, the black and white plaster dog, bigger than Ramona, that always sat with one ear cocked in front of the door. Beezus thought admiringly about the amount of imagination it took to pretend that a scarred and chipped plaster dog was real. If only she had an imagination like Ramona's. Maybe Miss Robbins would say her paintings were free and imaginative and would tack them on the middle of the wall. When they reached the park, Beezus left Ramona and Ralph at the sand pile, and feeling more and more discouraged at her own lack of imagination, hurried to the recreation center. The class had already poured paint into their muffin tins and were painting on paper thumbtacked to drawing boards. The room hummed with activity. Miss Robbins, wearing a gay paint-smeared smock, flew from one artist to another, praising, correcting, suggesting. Beezus waited until Miss Robbins finished explaining to a boy that he should not outline a mouth with black paint. Her mouth wasn't outlined in black, was it? Then Beezus said, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm late, Miss Robbins." She stared in fascination at Miss Robbins' earrings. They came almost to her shoulders and were made of silver wire, twisted and bent into interesting shapes. Not the shape of anything in particular, just interesting shapes. "That's all right, Miss Robbins." Her earrings swinging smiled at Beezus. "Get your paints and paper. Today everyone is painting an imaginary animal." "An imaginary animal?" Beezus repeated blankly. How could she possibly think of an imaginary animal? As Beezus poured paint into her muffin tin and tacked a sheet of paper to her drawing board, she tried to think of an imaginary animal, but all the animals she could think of, cats and dogs, cows and horses, lions and giraffes, were discouragingly real. Reluctantly, Beezus took the only vacant seat, which was beside a boy named Wayne, who came to the class only because his mother made him. Once Beezus had hung her sweater on the back of a chair, and Wayne had printed "Post no bills" on it in chalk. Beezus had worn it all the way home before she discovered it. Since then, she did not care to sit beside Wayne. Today, she noticed he had parked a grape-flavored lollipop on a paper towel beside his muffin tin of paint. Well, boys and girls, that's all we have time for today, but I'll see you tomorrow at Storytime.